Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, rail fans, train spotters, and railway nut jobs around. Welcome back. Welcome back to the next episode of Railroad Ghost Stories with TTC, a series where we dive into the words on the incredibly designed pages of Ghost Train by Tony Reevy. And today we have one of my favorite railroad ghost legends. A legend that is so eerie, so mysterious, and so full of detail. It sends shivers down my spine every time I read this tale. It goes to the Rockies, where we visit the state of Colorado, probably one of the most profound and renowned states in the country west of the Great Divide, that just so happens to have so much history with the railroads there. From main lines to short lines to narrow gauge lines. It truly encapsulates the imagination when you look at how much history there is here. But, ladies and gentlemen, enough of that. We're here to hear a ghost story. So, without further ado, let us begin with the Ghost Train of Marshall Pass. The old narrow-gauge Denver and Rio Grande main line over Marshall Pass is gone now. Many years ago, it was the scene of one of America's most famous ghost train incidents. Back when the Marshall Pass line was only a few years old, a passenger train was climbing to the 12,000-foot summit. The engineer got a signal on the cab gong to stop and ground the train to a halt. Just as he stopped, he heard a whistle somewhere behind him. Soon, the conductor came running up and demanded to know why the train was stopped. He hadn't given any signal, he said. The engineer started on his run feeling uneasy for no particular reason, and this incident really jittered him. He had to meet train number 19, and another was following him close, so he was in a dangerous situation by the time he got his train moving. He heard a whistle again, looked back, and saw with horror that a train was speeding behind him, going much faster than he was. A collision seemed inevitable. The now frightened engineer pulled the throttle wide open, and his engine plunged forward like a frightened rabbit. His train rocketed through clogged snow sheds and across rough track, in danger of plunging off the rails at any minute. The engineer kept the throttle open, though, because the train behind was catching up. The firemen and most of the passengers saw the train following. A wild rumor swept through the coaches that the second train was being run by a crazy engineer, determined to collide with their train. The engineer reached the summit of Marshall Pass and muttered a prayer under his breath. He looked back, and the following train was still there. It was close enough now that he could make out details. The engine's drivers were bigger than the ones on his engine, and a man stood on top of one of the cars, waving frantically. A sharp curve approached, and the engineer looked back again. The following train was just a couple of 100 yards away. Then the engineer saw something that chilled him through and through. As his train reached the middle of the curve, he could see the engineer of the following train clearly. The man was leaning out of his cab, laughing. His face was white like the face of a corpse. Snow began falling, and still the chase was on. The engineer reached a bridge with a low speed limit, but he didn't dare slow down. He rocketed across the bridge, and still the second train followed him, seeming to gain on his train foot by foot. Now, the engineer could see the switch lamp marking the siding where he had orders to meet number 19. The engineer's blood ran cold when he saw number 19 was not waiting in the siding. Now he might be rammed from ahead as well as behind. Just past the switch, he saw a red light waving across the track, the railroader's signal for danger ahead. Without even thinking about it, the engineer reversed the engine and threw on the brakes. He began to pray again and expected any minute to feel the jolt as the pursuing train rammed his, killing who knows how many passengers back in the coaches. He waited for a second and, feeling no crash, looked back. He saw the pursuing train yards away. Suddenly, just before the pursuing train crashed into his, the track seemed to spread. The engine rolled off the side of the mountain, and the entire train rolled into the canyon. The engineer listened for the sound of the crash at the bottom, but all he could hear was the whistle of the wind. The engineer had more surprises in store that night. Looking at the track ahead again, he saw that the caution signal had also vanished. It wasn't number 19 after all. The opposing train must still be ahead of him. The engineer got his train into the next siding before number 19 passed by. He finished his run to Green River, and here's perhaps the strangest part of the tale. As he got ready to leave the engine, he found a message traced in the frost of his cab window. And I will show you folks what it actually read in the way it was written. A freight train was wrecked as you saw, it said. Now that you saw it, you will never make another run. The engine was not under control, and 4 section men were killed. If you ever run on this road again, you will be wrecked. This mystery was too much for the engineer. He quit the Denver and Rio Grande that day and got a job with the Union Pacific. Workmen went out the next day, but found no train wrecked in the canyon. The phantom train of Marshall Pass was never seen again. And with this, folks, the story of the ghost train of Marshall Pass comes to an end. It is stories like this that send chills down your spine just when you hear the way they are described. It is so incredible thinking and visualizing it in my mind when I hear this story. And if you see old images of Marshall Pass, there aren't that many, but when you see them, you can understand just how perilous it was up there, nearly 3 miles in the sky, in the mountains, in areas that are more perilous and treacherous than anywhere else for railroads in the country. And when you think about such an event like this, what forces are at play? Just what was the universe trying to show to this engineer, his firemen, and the passengers on board his train. So, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this installment of Railroad Ghost Stories with TTC. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy Thanksgiving.